Anthropic have been caught destroying millions of books legally, and as someone who loves books, this hurts me on a visceral level. However, we need to actually look at the real story. Anthropic did not just burn millions of priceless rare books, medieval manuscripts, etc., just for the hell of it. Hell, they didn't even touch that kind of content. We need to look at what the truth of this story is, what actually happened, because it's a lot more bureaucratic, a lot more grey areas, and also a little bit bleaker as a result of that. This is not just Fahrenheit 451, but something much more modern, much more interesting. So we're going to be having a look at what is actually happening, why Anthropic has destroyed lots of books, and why they were kind of forced to do so by the legal system. It's a very weird story. So let's go through the basics. Anthropic have bought mountains of secondhand books, cut off their spines, scanned every page, and then discarded the paper. They've pulped it. It is called destructive scanning, and it's a way to get information out of a book, bring it into your large language model, your artificial intelligence, and then get rid of the physical copy. But why? Why did they do that? It's because when you have one physical copy and you turn that into one private digital copy, that is legally cleaner than simply making another copy and keeping both. It's not Fahrenheit 451. It's something a lot more modern and a lot more sinister as a result of that. So we're going to be looking into it and why this has happened. Lots of people are obviously very, very upset, and I 100% agree with that. Oh, I'm going to do a retake. Sorry, YouTube, if anyone's watching. AI editor, we're going to do a retake. That wasn't really working. And if anyone is on YouTube, apologies. Oh, I see a thumbs up. That's unfortunate. Always a problem with doing these things live. Anthropic have just been caught destroying millions of books legally. However, did they... Oh my god. Retake editor. Anyone watching live, you get to see the process, you get to see the sausage being made here. I do apologize. Anthropic have just been caught destroying millions of books legally. Why? Lots of people are very rightfully upset. As somebody who loves books, who actually has a very empty bookcase at the moment because I haven't shipped them over from the UK, I feel this viscerally. I do not like the idea of books being destroyed, and I'm sure a lot of you are in the same place. However, this is being blown up. This has gone viral on various different social media with this idea that Anthropic are taking ancient manuscripts and medieval illuminated books and cutting off their spines and destroying them. That is not quite the case. We're going to look at what kind of books they have been bringing in, why, and why they decided it was better to destroy the books rather than, for example, storing them or recirculating them. The true story is a lot more bureaucratic and maybe bleaker as a result of that. Basically, Anthropic have bought mountains of second-hand books, cut off their spines, scanned every page, and then discarded the paper. Why? It is because one physical copy becoming one private digital copy is legally cleaner than simply making another copy and keeping both. This is Fahrenheit 451, but with lawyers this time, a lot scarier. And this story matters now because AI companies are buying old books as a source of clean, human written data. They want to train their models on stuff that has not been infected by artificial intelligence. And the internet is increasingly polluted by AI-generated slop because of the popularity of ChatGPT and Claude. That means the machines need to go back to books to learn from human voice and to bring back in much higher quality training data. So in this video, I'm going to separate a couple of things that keep getting mixed together. Was using books to train Claude fair use? And we're going to have to look at the piracy matter that they have just settled on. They just paid $1.5 billion in order to deal with a piracy claim. Was cutting up a purchased book and replacing it with a private scan fair use? And was downloading millions of pirated books fair use? That's what they've just settled on. And the answers here are yes, yes, and no. And legally, it all gets very, very complicated. But emotionally, they're still destroying books at the end of the day, which upsets me and probably a few of you out there. And the distinction here is really, really important. So let's have a look at what has been found. Basically something called Project Panama. It was initially revealed by 404 Media. I highly recommend you go and subscribe to them. I highly recommend that you check out their stuff. They do some very important work. They actually broke this story about a week ago, but it's only now just gone mainstream, mainly because of this guy called Hedgie over on Twitter. And I believe this now has 21 million views. Yikes. This is where it has gone broadly public, but it was based initially off the investigative journalism of 404 Media, so they should have the kudos here. I'm going to go through that in a moment, but the basic idea behind Project Panama was to buy millions of used books, cut off the bindings, scan every page, keep a digital copy forever, and destroy the original book. Why did they have to destroy the book? So this is not just a couple of interns sitting around with a flatbed scanner. No, this is an industrial pipeline to drive the amount of data required by these artificial intelligence companies, and they needed to do this at scale. They had to spend millions of dollars buying millions of physical books. Often they were used books and they're being purchased off places like Facebook Marketplace, buying them from wholesalers, etc. Then services, not Anthropic directly, but service providers would remove the binding and cut the pages to size. I have seen videos of this and they're quite horrific. It's a bit like a slaughterhouse, but for books. Production scanners would then capture every page and create digital files, and then the paper originals get discarded. They will buy them, they cut them up, they scan them, and then they discard. And the court record, which has now come to light, describes Anthropic's ambition as creating a central library of all the books in the world and retaining it forever. And then they're not putting these directly into the model. Have to be careful here. Anthropic could then choose different subsets of that library, this new library of Alexandra, and then put those subsets into its training data for model training runs. So it's not quite the same as them just loading everything into the model. Some people have been making this mistake. No, it's instead having a digital library which you can use subsets of for your training runs. So every scanned book is not necessarily sitting verbatim inside Claude. That is important. And not every single book is necessarily used in every single training run, but instead think of it as them building a private source library. The scans go into the library and then the engineers can select material from the library to provide different models. But why books? Why do they have to do this in the first place? Well, basically because Claude and ChatGPT have become too successful. A lot of the content written online, both on social media and in blogs and websites, is now generated by artificial intelligence. This is a problem. The AI has started to poison its own food supply, and the public internet contains lots of duplication, SEO rubbish, scrape copies, enormous quality, low quality information already. That has been the case for multiple years, but it now has a growing volume of AI generated text as well, stuff that's been spat out in industrial quantities by these models. This creates a big problem. Future AI models are going to be training on the output of existing AI models. And if that quality is low, then that's going to be fed back into these models and lead to a decrease in the quality of the models over time. It's a bit of a weird problem that we knew was going to be an issue a couple of years ago, but now it is becoming, it's come to fruition just because there is so much AI content out there. Old books, specifically books that were written before 2022, when generative AI became widespread, are really useful. They are structured, they're long form, they contain deep specialist information, and they were written before ChatGPT. So anything before 2022, extremely valuable for these AI companies. Also, a lot of this has not been digitized. If you ever go into a secondhand bookshop, for example, there'll often be, these books that you'll see, and you kind of think, well, nobody's ever going to buy them. Like I always see like Microsoft Access 95, like a user's guide, stuff like that. Nobody's ever going to use that or buy that. That is the kind of book that Anthropic and these other labs are really wanting to get their hands on, because it's still high quality training data. So we're not talking about medieval manuscripts here. We do have to be careful, but we are still talking about books that are being destroyed. So 404 Media, who I pulled up earlier, and again, make sure you subscribed, reported on a company openly pitching physical books to AI labs for slot-free training data. So this is a company called IsbinDB, who's been caught inside of this whole business that's been going on. Not going to be a very popular company, but they will go into AI labs and saying, hey, we'll go and source these books for you. We will chop them up. We will destroy the books, and we'll talk about the legal ramifications for that. And we will give you this clean data. So Anthropic, again, are not doing this themselves. They're hiring somebody to do it for them. And the sales pitch of these companies is basically the best training data in the world is sitting on shelves, distributed out there. We are going to pull it all together and we're going to digitize it for you and give you access to this high quality data. Still though, there's this big question: why do you need to destroy the books? I'm sure most of us would be okay if you bought the book, you scanned the book, you had a digital copy. Maybe it's a bit grey area ethically and morally that you're using it to train your model, but at least you're keeping the book, you're sending it to a good home, you're putting it into a library, something, you're doing something with it. It's the destruction of the book, which is very upsetting. And this is why people are getting very emotional, quite rightly, about this issue. Why do you need to destroy the books? So, unfortunately, this is a side effect. Legally, it helps Anthropic, it helps the AI companies, because the judge is thinking about different uses of how these books are being used. So, if you buy and destroy a book, you have one print copy which becomes one digital copy. That is fair use, because you are not, unlike piracy, you are not scanning the physical copy of the book in order to create a digital copy which you then distribute. That is a very different thing. So this is what's been happening, and this is how a lot of the AI companies were training before. They were using pirated material. So they were going to websites like Anna's Archive, and they were downloading the world's books. That has got them in trouble, and recently there's been a settlement of $1.5 billion that Anthropic has agreed to pay to various authors and publishers as a result of that. That is not considered fair use. However, if you take a digital copy, if you take a physical copy, transform it, and it's a transformational activity, into a digital copy, and then destroy that initial copy, that is quintessentially transformative, according to the judges, and that comes under fair use. So, unfortunately, destroying these books and not allowing them to be used for anything else, and also not redistributing your digital copies, so Anthropic can't even give out their new digital copies without it being a problem, that makes it legally more sound for Anthropic, even if morally it feels absolutely disgusting that books are being destroyed. So this is a legal bind that Anthropic are in, and this is in part because our legal systems are old-fashioned. They are not able to deal with these new kind of technologies and basically digitization as a whole. They haven't been able to deal with it for 20 plus years, and now it's coming to a head. So that's why Anthropic are doing the destruction. So the judge and the judgment that has come forward is there is no surplus copying. The source copy was destroyed, and that conversion means that it is fair use. That is the problem here right now. Another thing that we need to talk about, because it's become very emotive and people have become very upset. Again, I understand it. I'm pissed off too. But we need to understand that this isn't just Fahrenheit 451. They're not confirming shelves of priceless first editions and destroying them because they don't want anyone else to have them. That's the viral version, which is these unique cultural treasures are being thrown in a giant bonfire and being used to feed these AI companies to make huge amounts of money. It's like the burning of the Library of Alexander all over again. Like we have learned nothing, we've continued, in fact, accelerated to be Philistines. That's not quite what's happened. As always, the truth is a little bit more grey. Basically, the court has said that Anthropic bought millions of books, often in used conditions. Think things like obsolete software manuals, telephone directories, pamphlets, old textbooks, specialist reference books, the kind of strange stuff that you see at the back of a secondhand shop, probably on the top of a few bookcases, unloved, dusty, and you kind of think, well, nobody's ever going to read that again. Why have they got that? Who is ever going to want that book? A lot of this material, and let's be clear here, would have been pulped eventually. Like there is a chain. You can donate a book to a charity shop. A charity shop will try and sell it. If they can't, they'll hand it off to someone like World of Books in the UK, who will try to sell it on eBay or on Facebook, or recirculate it back into other charity shops. If they can't do that, it will eventually become pulped. It will get destroyed. So a lot of these books are on their way to that anyway. Destructive scanning is also a normal high-volume digestion technique that is used. Basically, loose pages can be scanned much faster and more accurately than a carefully preserved bound volume. That's why, from an economic point of view, destruction was used. But there is a legitimate concern about obscure and out-of-print editions that are disappearing from circulation. So it's all well and good to say that this is mainly technical manuals and stuff that people aren't necessarily going to be reading. We don't know. We don't know. There will be some stuff in there which is genuinely valuable and stuff that we do not want to lose. And without inventorying the whole thing, which I think it will be impossible now, we do not know. But they are not burning priceless artifacts and Gutenberg Bibles and manuscripts on vellum. They are destroying, as part of this destructive process of scanning, books that were probably not going to be read anyway. And I know people are going to crucify me for that, but there are plenty of books out there that are very valuable to the AI company, but valueless in their printed form. Still, it kind of stings. We do not have good evidence Anthropic deliberately targeted unique last copies or anything museum grand antiquarian. Of course, they're not going to do that. It's too expensive. Instead, it's going to be this junk. It's going to be the bulk kind of stuff that they can buy in order just to access the human language inside. Still, yikes, but it is less apocalyptic than the viral version that you might have been seeing going around social media. So what we're kind of seeing here is a shift in how old books are dealt with. So previously, as I mentioned, they would eventually go to pulp. Especially ones that cannot be sold. They would go through various dealers, they go through charities, they go through various distributions, but at the end of the day, if nobody wanted it, it's too expensive to hold on to inventory, physical books that nobody's ever going to buy, or if they're going to buy, they're going to be buying them for a few pennies. So eventually, everything does get pulped. There is a wider market starting here, though. So secondhand bookstores in several European countries, and again this surfaced on Twitter, have reported strange bulk orders based on enormous lists of ISBN numbers. One request reportedly contained around 3,000 English titles, and the giveaway was the fact that the subjects were all over the place. It was geomechanics, Irish folklore, advanced ceramics, and a whole bunch of completely unrelated areas. And these weren't particularly valuable books. These weren't things that could be resold anywhere. So this started to raise some flags, and this again was reported in the article. These booksellers realizing, who would be buying this? This is not a normal human collector buying this. It's not a reseller. There's no value here. So who is going for it? It didn't look like a normal resale order. Instead, it is dataset acquisition. Very, very different. And this has been happening now that this has come to light. Lots of other booksellers have come forward and said, oh, yes, we had an order like that. We had 50,000 books across all these weird kind of areas, and we didn't know who it was. But yeah, we completed that order because these services are now openly marketing printed books as clean AI training data. This is where it gets a bit sinister because it has become an industry, and people are making probably quite a lot of money off this as well. However, that doesn't mean that every single weird, strange book order out there is necessarily going to be an AI company. It just means that this is something that is extant and is happening in the world right now. The wider signal is clear, though, that clean, human-written text is extremely valuable for AI companies. They need to get their hands on clean data sets so they can continue to improve their models, because using synthetic data or using AI-generated data leads to the models getting poisoned over time. And that's, I think, why this story has broken out of Twitter. Twitter is normally where all of this information is discussed. People get very, very angry about. I think this story, because it is about emotional objects, it's about books, which we love, being destroyed. This has the potential to do a lot more damage to Anthropic than all of the more abstract issues that they've been getting recently a lot of trouble for, things like not supporting open weight artificial intelligence, going against the rest of the American AI scene on that particular issue. Those are too abstract. Whereas if you hear an AI company is buying millions of books and destroying them, that's going to piss some people off. So Anthropic have, for the last 6 months or so, had their hands full when it comes to public relationships and been doing a lot of things that have been extremely unpopular. I think this is going to damage them more than anything else as soon as this breaks containment and makes it into the larger mainstream media. Because a data center open weight architectures, these are abstract concepts, whereas a book physically going through a guillotine, being scanned and then everything thrown away and pulped is not. That is an extremely emotional issue, and I think this is going to come and bite them in the arse, and they're going to really regret this. So there's one small, I guess, caveat, or this is the bit that actually annoys me the most. So Anthropic are going ahead and destructively scanning all these books. Yes, we know that. That's upsetting. But they are creating digital copies of it. And these digital copies are going to be fed into the large language models, obviously for training. But it also means, in a way, we have preserved that book. Some of these books were never, ever going to be preserved. They were going to be pulped, whereas now they're sitting in a private library. The problem is that that private library is not going to be opened for circulation. That private library is only going to be used for feeding the machine, feeding the LLM. So the problem here is not that the machine, AI, hates books. This isn't Fahrenheit 451. They're not destroying books because they're dangerous. The problem here is that the machine values them more than we do. These are books that were unloved sitting on shelves, decreasing in value all the time. They're never going to be read. But for an AI, they were incredibly valuable. What's upsetting, though, is that these books are in a private repository, which, unlike something like Google Books, will not be made accessible. Because as soon as they make that accessible, they legally will be republishing copywritten scans. So from a legal point of view, Anthropic have to keep this closed, which means they destroy the physical version and then they have to lock off the digital version and not allow that to re-enter distribution. That's a little bit upsetting to me. I mean, potentially one day these will come out and they'll be able to release them. And I don't think they're necessarily locking it off because they want to hoard all this knowledge and they hate humanity. I think this is just from a legal point of view, they have to. Otherwise, they will be accused of piracy and they will be sued into oblivion. And from a dataset point of view, they don't want to share with the other large language models. So we're in this unfortunate situation where all of these digital scans now exist, which could be very valuable, could be really useful, but only one company has access to them and they are locked away inside this private research library. Not entirely Anthropic's fault, but still fairly upsetting. And again, this is going to be something that annoys people. So the whole thing is a little bit more complicated than, oh my God, Anthropic are burning books. It's not illegal, but it's still not nothing. And there are reasonable guardrails I think we should put in place to protect books. I think destructively scanning genuinely rare or unique copies is heinous. I think morally that is very hard to defend and it is gross. Even if it is legally the right thing to do, I still think ethically that is a very disgusting thing to do. I think we should be maintaining auditable records showing where this training material came from. This is not something AI companies do. They are not well known for this because most of the time they want to cover their tracks. But in this case, they're buying all of these books in and then putting them into a private repository. So they actually do know what all of the data is, because they have catalogued it and they've scanned it. So it'd be nice to have auditable records of what that material is, because we now know that they actually do have that data. And ideally, in an ideal world, the rights holders should be compensated where the law requires that as well. And we should be depositing public domain and culturally important scans into trusted archives when possible, even if they are not initially open to the public. It'd be nice if we had more than one copy, not just a copy sitting in a private repository, but instead we give them to the Library of Congress or some similar body so that they can be maintained and protected and eventually at some point released to the public. The Fahrenheit 451 comparison is funny because the visual is so extreme. Burning books, it's a horrible, visceral idea, and quite rightly, as a civilized society, we find it very upsetting. However, the motivation here is actually opposite, ironically. Anthropic did not destroy the books because they believe the knowledge is dangerous. It destroys them because the knowledge was valuable, and it needs them for its models. Yeah, in a weird way, it's even more dystopian. If you found this useful, make sure you are subscribed on aiwithkyle.com and on the YouTube channel, where I'm going to be continuing to bring you the news about what's going on in the world of artificial intelligence and how to use AI to both start and grow a business and hopefully carve yourself out a space in this strange world that we are now moving into. So again, aiwithkyle.com. You can join the newsletter for free and make sure you're subscribed on the YouTube as well. Thank you.